Okay. Yeah, and I'll be presenting with Doenja on TS. Okay, so TaskCams are basically inexpensive digital cameras that we've designed for user studies that you can make yourselves. They're very simple. On the back, there's a screen. And the idea is that researchers can load questions onto the cameras, and they appear scrolling on the screen. You can give them to research participants. They can scroll up and down and choose a question that they find intriguing, and then respond to it by taking a picture. The pictures they take can reveal their settings or lives in ways that are useful for design research. Now, I really want to stress that these are cameras designed for you to make yourselves. They're completely open source, and we've designed them to be easy to make and modify, and everything, all the resources you need to make them are on the website www.probetools.net. And if you want to go there now, you can ignore the rest of the talk. But in case you don't want to do that, I'll continue. So when I say they're designed for user studies, we think the TaskCams are probably usable in from a variety of different approaches, but we designed them to reflect and support an approach that we call cultural probes. This is an approach that Tony Dunn, Elena Pacente, and I came up with almost 20 years ago, and it basically is a design-led approach in which usually we give collections of tasks, evocative tasks to people, and then the way they respond to those tasks give us kind of fragmentary insights into their, both how they live, but also how they think and what they believe and hope and fear. Often cultural probe tasks are paper-based. They involve annotating maps or diagrams or postcards and so forth, but we've often included pretty simple technologies as well. And one that we've used regularly over time are simple disposable film cameras that we repackage with prompts for pictures on the back, as shown here. The problem with these cameras are great, but the problem is that they're becoming an obsolete technology. Disposable cameras are more and more difficult to find, and in particular, it's really hard to find places that develop that film. So we've started a new project called Probe Tools, in which we're designing a series of cameras and audio recorders that are meant to kind of modernize probe tools in this way. And the TaskCam is the first of these camera that we're releasing. It's a simple one-to-one replacement for disposable cameras with pictures, and we think of it as kind of the workhorse of the collection. It's the one we suspect will be most widely used and available. Again, the TaskCam is really simple. Technically, it's based on an Arduino. We've developed a shield for the Arduino that controls the screen and the buttons and talks to the SD card and triggers the camera and so forth. This is really easy to assemble. In addition, we've designed and released the plans for two cases. One is a 3D print case, which is designed to be super simple and easy to print on any 3D printer without support material. And the other is a paper case that can be constructed from 2 sheets of A4 card that can be either laser cut or cut out by hand. And again, all the resources that are needed to make this stuff is on www.probetools.net. Make no mistake, this is an infomercial, and actually kind of a cheesy one. I'm not embarrassed. Anyway, to make sure that we were working along the right lines and developing the TaskCams, we gave 6 to Will and Doenja to try out for their own user study, and Doenja is going to provide a bit of a testimonial now.
Yeah, so when we got to TaskCams, we were starting up a project in which we were exploring the living situations of people who were living in houses that could be considered alternative to normative domestic dwellings. So we recruited a diverse set of participants in Vancouver, Canada, and we were exploring their values, practices, and ways of making home. So for example, a minimalist living with 5 kids, or a woman living on a nearby island with a zero waste approach to everyday materials, a van dweller, a boat dweller. And some of our participants were in a legal gray area, but simultaneously they were really eager to kind of share their lifestyle, so they were blogging about this. So a cultural probe study really seemed perfect. And when we got to TaskCams, we started to just trying to get to know them a little. We started assembling them, uploading some questions. We laser cutted a paper version. This is all very easy. We 3D printed them in ABS and PLA, and while the PLA printed with a little bit more support material and some aftercare filing that down, the ABS really came out perfectly. And then in our probe study, we used the TaskCams flexibly, and we especially want to draw attention today to sort of the material ways in which we worked with the TaskCams. So we were really able to work on the platform in a very open way and to really make them fit with the people we were designing for. So we spray painted some of the ABS printed ones, and the sturdiness of this material was really well suited for people living in vans, boats, so more mobile, or living with 5 kids where something more durable and robust is really desirable. But at the same time, for some of our other participants, we needed to adjust the TaskCams a little bit. So while PLA could be considered zero waste, it still had sort of a plasticky feel to it, and overall the idea of a disposable camera required some care to be made acceptable for our more sustainably oriented participants. So we engaged in some activities also in the spirit of cultural probes, where we enacted some of the resourceful practices of our participants. So for example, we started repurposing fabrics such as discarded sheets, sweaters, and blankets. And in these explorations with wool, we used a fabric stiffener to create a soft yet strong camera enclosure. But unlike paper, wool kind of shrinks and changes structure when you apply this stiffener and when it's drying. And this is a process that was kind of hard to predict, and even more so with products that were once something else, like a wool sweater. So this required a few iterations and a few sweaters to get a grasp on sort of the shrinkage, and we had to adjust the laser cutter schematic of the TaskCam. We also started making our own paper out of scraps from our studio. So we used this paper for the enclosure of the camera, as well as accompanying booklets and a personalized invitation. And so we made several batches of paper, and each of these batches of pulp from our studio resulted in slightly different paper composite that was also acting unpredictably. So we had to adjust and readjust the laser cut settings for each batch. And as this was made out of mixed scrap fibers, this paper, it offered less support for the electronics than the 3D printed version or the original cardstock version of the TaskCam. So this highlighted an issue with the TaskCam's on-off switch and the 3D printed lever that both ended up breaking off during our explorations. So this lever was really easily reprinted and fixed, but the switch was a little bit more troublesome from our sort of geopolitical position in ordering the electronics was just not a feasible thing for us. But we were able to work around this, but it also kind of highlighted some limitations of open-ended source platforms, such as sourcing key components and expertise. So simultaneously to these material processes, we had started to populate the TaskCam with questions, and we were kind of trying these out to see on ourselves to see if they struck the right balance between being open-ended while still somewhat intelligible, as well as some questions being specific to each person's life, and sort of broader feelings about what could span across all participants about what makes home. And so this process helped us to understand how the TaskCam could be sort of a central thing in our probe kit, but it also made clear that we needed a few other activities in terms of material form and temporal pacing, and that could connect back to the TaskCam questions. So given the material focus of our probe bags, we explored and set out to learn a bunch of new skills related to these materials, such as sewing, embroidering, metal stamping, and this, of course, came with a learning curve and involved some trial and error, but we kind of see these efforts as a form of reciprocity and really recognizing the values of our participants and being thankful for them to sharing their thoughts, practices, and lives with us. And this approach also provides a perspectives on our hiccups with the TaskCam, that are not really that different from the other activities that required us to get to know the material, speculate on how it would shape our participants' experience, and we were just kind of iteratively adjusting all of these until they were right. So despite some material and technical difficulties, the TaskCams were really flexible to work with. And this was all part of a larger project that we're presenting at this 2018, in which both the making of the cultural probes as well as the responses were treated as rich design material that we worked into speculative responses of what it would mean to design for these different types of homes. So the TaskCam is good.
All right, thanks. Well, as you can imagine, when we heard that the TaskCams had worked well for Ovalle and Doenja, we were all overjoyed. This is a spontaneous view of our studio reacting to the news. But Of course, we're never really satisfied with mere success, and when we heard about the problems we had, we bent our efforts to making a new and improved TaskCam. So I'm really happy to announce today the TaskCam Mark II. The TaskCam Mark II looks on the surface much like the Mark I. The major difference here is that all the switches are surface mounted, so there'll be no more problems with pesky breaking switches. It's quite robust. The real action is inside the TaskCam. We're releasing a new TaskCam Arduino Shield, which integrates all the technical features of the TaskCam apart from the Arduino. So on one PCB, it has the power and the storage, the screen and controls, and a new upgraded 2 meg camera. This is really great because what it means is you can take the Arduino TaskCam out of the box, plug in a couple of AA batteries, an Arduino, and an SD card, and it is a fully functioning TaskCam. We're very proud of that. The other cool thing is that the Arduino Shield is perforated. It comes in 3 parts, and it's easy to snap apart into the separate modules and then reconfigure in a number of different ways. In fact, so far we've discovered about 20 different ways that the TaskCams to be reconfigured without soldering. This means that the TaskCam supports all kinds of different form, functions, and shapes, and can be modified really easily by people without really high technical skills, as well as being open to more substantial modifications for those people who have the chops. And that means we can design TaskCams for any situation. Everything you need to know to make the TaskCams is on www.probetools.net, where you will find complete instructions for building several versions of the TaskCam, as well as other cameras and devices that we haven't even mentioned yet. If you go into instructions for how to build a TaskCam, you'll find a complete description of what the device is and how it might be used. A list of all the components you need to build TaskCams, including links to sources for buying off-the-shelf components, source code for the software, source code for the various, both the 3D cases and templates for the paper cases. And in addition, we have for each camera, we have a complete, lovely, beautifully illustrated step-by-step instructions for how to construct the device. So again, this is super easy to make and super easy to modify for anybody. The TaskCam, as I said, depends on the TaskCam Arduino Shield. We are currently batch producing a number of the shields, which we will sell at cost from our website. We expect them to be released 1st of June this year, and we're taking pre-orders now. Okay? So, to conclude, the TaskCam is an inexpensive digital camera for user studies that you can make yourselves. They're based on a proven technique. They are easy to make, easy to modify, they're reusable, they're completely open source, and at about $50 a camera, they're pretty inexpensive ways to pursue user studies. I don't hope that didn't happen. So go to I could talk longer, probetools.net, and order today. All right, thanks.
Thanks so much, Bill and Doenja. Do we have questions, please? Okay. Well, in the spirit of the infomercial, I wondered if you could give us any insights into the other developments of probe tools that are coming our way shortly.
I don't really want to. I
Some
can hint.
sneak peeks?
I can hint. The cool thing is when we realized that we could build our own cameras for probe studies, we realized we didn't need to just recreate the functions of existing commercial products, but could make things that were slightly unusual and more aimed towards probe studies. So without telling you too much, we're developing a camera that's really good for getting overviews of situations over time without disrupting privacy, and an audio tool that we hope will help reveal spoken comments from people in ways that will be kind of playful and insightful.
That's great. And why did you actually start with this one? Why was this the first?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I really don't want people to think that this is the most boring of the lot, because this is the one that actually we know works. We've used cameras with questions in many studies, and I believe other people have too. And using prompts to get people pointing cameras in different ways is just an amazing technique to get images, insights into people's lives that are kind of spontaneous and unguarded and would show you things you wouldn't get if you asked them to take pictures of their home.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I'm Andrea Barbin from IBM Watson Health. And I'm curious what users, your research participants, how they reacted when they didn't see the immediate feedback with the cameras, like in terms of lighting, or because with our phones, of course, we're so accustomed to being able to get that immediate feedback.
Let me answer, let me give you one short response, and then Doenja will tell you the truth. But from our point of view, not being able to see the picture you're taking means that you can't stage your pictures in the same way you do with smartphones. This is also why it's not an app, or one of the reasons it's not an app. And not being able to edit the pictures equally means that the images we get are unguarded. Sometimes they're blurry, sometimes they're unusable, but often they have a kind of candid quality we find really interesting.
Yeah, and I think just from our perspective, I mean, of course, it is a camera, but when we gave it to our participants, especially with the paper enclosures and the wool enclosures, they just really saw that we put a lot of effort into making that, so they also saw it more as sort of a unique, bespoke gift to them. So I don't think they started thinking about it as like just a way to make pictures, but more like a way of sharing their lives. So I don't know if you need, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.